Hi, everyone. Welcome. We will get started in just a second. Make sure we have everyone on. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for coming to our Advocacy 101 information with fellow advocates. This session is being recorded. I will turn it over to Lori in just a second, and she will be able to start us off, and then we will kind of go into some panelist questions. If there's any questions for Lori or any of our panelists, please put them in the Q&A box since we are in webinar mode, and we will get to them either when they're speaking or at the end, whatever makes the most sense. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Lori Ponce with Coalition for Strong Nebraska. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. Thanks for attending today. Our webinar today is Advocacy 101. Oh, I'm Lori Ponce, Director of Coalition for a Strong Nebraska, and we're happy to have this webinar today in partnership with the Nonprofit Association of the Midlands and with the Civic Engagement Table. Our panelists today are Robert Patterson from Kids Can, Corey Day from the table, and there she is, Rachel Gibson from the League of Women Voters. Hi, Rachel. We're going to do things a little differently today. It is Advocacy 101, but what I'm going to be talking to the advocates about is the special circumstances of this session and how they plan to do their advocacy in light of the special circumstances. And I'll talk about what those special circumstances are here in a second. Just a reminder, if you have questions, put them in the chat or in the Q&A, and Hannah will kind of vet those questions at any time during the webinar. So I want to thank our panelists, and if when you first answer a question, if you can again introduce yourself and who you're with, and we'll get started. So we are entering a 60-day session, a short session. 60 days, it goes from January 7th to, and it's scheduled to end on April 17th, which gives us very little time. 59th day of the session is scheduled for April 10th. That means the majority of all the substantive work needs to be done by April 10th. That is not much time when you think about there are usually around 600 new bills introduced during the short session of the biennium. There are carryover bills because it is the second part of the biennium. There are carryover bills that are still alive and that will possibly come up on the agenda. And I would like our panelists to talk about any possible carryover bills that they're watching. There are, for example, LR 24CA. I know some of our advocates are working on that. That has to do with the Electoral College. LB 258, that would change how the minimum wage law is being implemented. That was passed by the vote by a vote of the people. And what I have recently learned is I don't know if it's a rule change or it's just something that the speakers decided to do. Historically, it's always been that if at the end of a session, a bill loses its priority status, and if you want it to be a priority again, you have to redesignate it the following year. That it is possible, and I believe it's at the speaker's discretion, that a bill that was declared a priority in 2025 can carry that designation to 2026. I don't know all the details of it, but we'll see how that comes into play when we talk about bills. And it's hard to tell how that will impact the flow of legislation. The big story, as always, is the budget shortfall. We are at, I believe, a $471 million budget shortfall for the upcoming session. The Department of Revenue also released a report in September estimating that the big, beautiful bill, the federal action, would cost Nebraska's state government about $216 million over the next 2 fiscal years. And that was factored into the latest budget shortfall forecast. We will have a significant Medicaid shortfall. I know that the governor has mentioned before having a $500 million general fund reduction from his state agencies, but I believe that several agency requests are asking for increases. And finally, there are 11 senators who are term limited out or are deciding not to run again. Those senators are Arch, Brandt, Michaela Cavanaugh, Clements, DeBoer, Dorn, Hansen, Hunt, Mosier, Merman, and Raybould. At least half of those are committee chairs and including the speaker and the chair of appropriations. So that will bring significant changes for the next 2027 session. And we don't know with those senators' plans, if they have plans for a big exit for their final session. So we'd like to hear what any of our panelists have heard about that. And so we will just get started. So the panel, you can expand on any of these topics, or I'll ask you a series of questions and just want to get your opinions and your thoughts on how you're going to do advocacy. So how about just your first reaction to that information, what we're dealing with the upcoming session? Can we start with you, Robert?
Um, like all of 2025, not surprised or shocked, but we know we have our work cut out for us. So a couple things that resonated. I didn't realize the number of senators that would be turning over or terming off. And one of the things I think of is it's like, oh, we have to kind of restart over for the kind of education aspect on how we talk about all of our bills and our issues. But I also feel like even with our veteran senators, we have to start over from zero every time anyway. So that's always something I would tell people new to keep it in mind. Just because you explained a certain way a bill worked or childcare subsidies worked to the senator or committee last year, they're not going to remember that. So I always kind of go back to kind of square one. One of the things that kind of also resonated. So obviously the bill that a lot of me and our peers are concentrating on is LB 304 for the child care subsidies. So Senator DeBoer is terming off, and so I think she's pretty much said this is kind of her legacy bill that she's kind of really, so this is kind of going to hopefully be her kind of big hurrah as she exits as well. So, and I think I forgot to reintroduce myself, but Robert Patterson with Kids Can Community Center.
Robert, can you say just a little bit about what LB 304 is?
Sure. So LB 304, and it's a little similar to the SNAP bill that from last year. So right now, to be eligible for child care subsidies, it has to be 185% of federal poverty level. So for example, family four, their household income has to be less than $60,000. So we're still talking really low income. If both parents are working full time, they could only be like $14.50 per hour or less. So that is set to sunset to 130%. So that would be devastating for a lot of our working families, and knowing that childcare could be. And there was just a report yesterday that we're one of the highest in the nation, and so if one child is $12,000 a year, you can imagine if they have one or two kids out of less than $60,000, they're not going to be able to cover it, and they're going to either have to get out of the workforce or work part-time, and it kind of to me goes against the whole idea for as a state we're trying to attract and retain as many employees as possible. So it's kind of counterintuitive. So when we talk about the shortfall later, I think there's some key messaging in there that we really need to talk about how we need to invest in Nebraska to get money out of Nebraska as well.
Yep. Yep. Thank you. Corey, do you have some initial reactions to that information?
Going to be an interesting year. I'm kind of with Robert. I did not realize how many state senators are going to be terming out. I mean, there's a few that we work with that we kind of knew to be aware of. It's going to be really interesting trying to get them to care about basically anything this year, because they're terming out and it's a short session, and last session was so volatile that I think people are not really looking forward to working together, to working in general. There's already been rumors of some senators just saying they're not going to bring any bills this session. So that's a little bit interesting, and it kind of also begs the question that like a lot of people in lobby school ask, for example, like, well, how do we get senators to work with us if they just like don't care or they just don't want to? And it's kind of hard to instill like, no, just do your best. It's going to be fine because you can't really guarantee that, and it's kind of just wishful thinking. So it'll be interesting to see how much those senators who are terming off want to be involved this year, and if maybe we can't convince them to do some Hail Marys and just kind of shoot for the stars in terms of legislation because they don't have an election to lose again.
Thank you, Corey. Rachel, your initial reactions.
Yeah, you hit on. I'm Rachel Gibson, Vice President Action for League of Women Voters of Nebraska. Yeah, Lori hit on some of the same things that are the first thing that come to mind for me, particularly with the amount of senators that will be leaving, that this is their last session. The one of the things that then I think about is also those that are running for reelection and the implication of that for what they bring, their votes, who they're listening to, that sort of thing. So I know we are going to be approaching almost every piece of legislation with a let's keep an eye to how they may perceive this as being an election issue. Not that we would change our stance or anything, but understanding that that's their perspective and, being ready for that question or giving them a, hey, and here's how this isn't going to be an issue in the election that they can work with. So that is one for sure. I'm concerned because of the combo of the budget and the amount of folks that are leaving, and just the national attention on things right now, that our conversations will be about things that pop up in the news. For example, I think that we'll probably be talking about McCook and that facility, and that has some real implications with how we spend our money and how we spend our resources. But I anticipate there are going to be other things that come up this session that suddenly take attention. Another one that I have newly been aware of, looking back at the bills that are carried over, are some related to energy policy, particularly with everything going on with OPPD and the North Omaha plant. Forgive me, I'm outside. I think that some of those that are more energy oriented might be getting a second look and will have a different flavor. So my concern is that in an effort to avoid talking about the budget and either not saying anything that would upset reelection, but also providing a place to run on reelection, is that this will feel far more political than usual. Not that good work can't be done, but that is definitely on my radar.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. I think we have several new advocates on this call, people who are just learning to engage. I'm sorry, Hannah, was there a question?
Yeah, I think it was kind of a question directed to Corey, maybe a little bit of, is there any way we can engage with them prior to the session to sort of hype them up? So anyone can answer, but it was after Corey's little segment. And then Lori, could you put the term limited senators in the chat?
Yep.
Perfect.
I can start, and I would definitely love to hear, Robert and Rachel's thoughts on this as well. This sounds really basic, but like bribing them with a little treat, like taking them out for coffee, bringing them lunch to their office, especially those senators. I think with freshman senators, almost more so, a lot of them do respond to like you reaching out to them. I know what I do a lot when I meet with senators is like, I don't have an agenda right now. I'm not here to ask you anything. I just want you to get to know our office and get to know me as someone who just wants to tell you things without an agenda, whether or not that's true. But you want to, you're like, hey, I'm just here for you as an ally and an individual who sees you as an individual who is doing this very difficult job. And the amount of times I will say, like, I just want to make your job easier in those meetings, they really respond to that. And another thing you can do to try and get to some of those senators is to meet with their staff, with their LA and their AAs, and just say, how do I make life in your office easier? What kind of information does your senator really like? how can we present information to your senator in your office in a way that helps you feel prepared for debate, prepared for hearings, prepared for when people come with lobby days? Like, what is going to work best for you? And that way, too, you can kind of build your inroads with trust where, they'll start sending you emails and texts. But also, I selfishly am like, hopefully that makes them like feel a little bit better about the work. Let they know that like maybe they have an ally in like the election area, which I mean, they already have a bunch. Rachel is one of them, obviously. Um, but just kind of like appealing to the most basic denominator. It seems kind of stupid, but like it really does work of being like, I'm here with lunch from Bison Witches, and I just want to hear you complain for a little bit and see if I can help you. Like it seems to work pretty well.
Yeah,
I
I would go ahead, Rachel.
I second any time that you can connect on that human level and follow your 501c3 rules though about for your donations or food or that type of thing. Different rules apply to different things, but yes, I think Corey's point of like highlighting that human aspect from a policy standpoint. I always like to start with asking them what bills they're really excited about or worried about this session to hear from them what's popping up, and then to kind of fight some of that political nature is that, the handful of really controversial bills is like maybe 20. There are 8 bills. So I think it's helpful to you can approach them the first time and it's not on a huge issue. Go in a smaller bill that's under the radar, take a look at what they've introduced and say, hey, this is really interesting. Tell me more. I'd love to support you. It's really helpful if your first interaction is not on one of those super, super controversial bills. The other thing is for each of your orgs, I would think about what you have that's special that could be useful to them. So for example, League of Women Voters, we're an entirely volunteer organization with 500 members across the state. Something we have that a lot of folks don't have is 500 members across the state. So if I have someone in, Ogallala, I'm happy to share that with a senator to say, if you want to know what your constituent thinks, like we've got X, Y, and Z in your district, I'm happy to connect you. If yours is access to expertise, if you work with providers, like figure out what you have that you can provide to them and be clear about what that is, because then they'll start seeing you as a resource for that particular thing. Sorry, Robert, go ahead.
No, you're good. And because I know there's nonprofit people, it's like we almost treat it like a donor meetings where that first meeting, you're probably not making the ask. You're just kind of laying the groundwork, educating, and trying to give them information that they may not have. So they're kind of looking for that. And as we've all alluded to, that there's hundreds of bills that they're introduced, so they cannot be the expert in all of it. And they really look at you as the expert. So take advantage of kind of that time as well. And if there's an event or like come see Kids Can programs in action, and then you can kind of slip in, here's what our families are facing. And when we talk about our families, we're talking about their constituents. So we're not, as a child care provider, a nonprofit, plighting our case, but we're saying these are the families in our community, kind of what they're seeing. I also want to double down on what Corey said for the legislative aid or their administrative aides. They're the gatekeepers. So the more you're able to work with them, and especially as you begin cultivating an actual bill, they're the ones that we work with. And I'm bringing it back another bill from last year. So I've already started work, several weeks ago with Senator Juarez's LA to kind of like, let's fine tune. What do we need to do? So all that kind of pre-work is done now because I'm not sure if Laura will cover it, but it's 10 days to introduce new bills and all these other bills. So everything is already set pretty much kind of going into before the session even starts. So the other thing I would add is pay attention, make time, because a lot of them have town halls or virtual town halls. That's the time to also kind of either circle the wagons or be there, or if you have other peers, because if they keep hearing questions about childcare or keep hearing questions about food or whatever, that starts to resonate with them, like, oh, this is an issue that we're facing. So take advantage of those times where they're already out there in the community seeking input.
I'll just
you.
piggyback off
Go
that
ahead.
and say, Robert, great point about the town halls. I hadn't thought it from that perspective, but sign up for newsletters. A lot of them have newsletters or follow their social media. One of them writes a column, go to those places they already are, so you already know what they're talking about and thinking about. And also, if you see something that is incorrect, you can know that you need to help provide them some information about that.
We have one
Sir.
question. If any of the panelists have a sense of how people are feeling among potentially state layoffs from the senators. Has anyone heard anything from the senators around potential layoffs? Okay. If we hear anything, we'll get back to you.
Not
Okay, so just
to that, but I
go
do
ahead.
highlight that there was an article just today, I think, in the Nebraska Examiner about the hole of money that we need to fill got even bigger. And budget requests have come in from different departments. And so if that's a question, that might be a place to look to see if that might impact. I think it will end up being part of the conversation, but I haven't heard anything yet.
Okay, thank you for that. I just want to back up a second, and Robert, to what you said about the 10 days of bill introduction. As many of our participants are newer advocates, for someone who plans to do advocacy in 2026, what are the main things they should know, in your opinion, about the legislature and the upcoming session? I went through some of those, but if you have a way to restate them or the importance of them, please feel free.
I was going to say, if you're going to bring in, we have thoughts of a new bill, now is the time, because holidays are coming and the senators are already kind of stacking up their bills. And like you said, we're going to have a bunch of carryover, so there's kind of even less time to be able to do that. But for this particular year, I also some peers kind of working on bills that have hopefully have a $0 fiscal note. So those things, if you can find if you're somehow able to find a $0 fiscal note that would be meaningful and impactful, these senators are also looking for wins. You know, we want some things to happen. So this could be the year that some things that might kind of get moved off to the side, if they need some wins or if there's some impacts that we can make and some rules and regulations, to me, now is the time. The other thing that I also think about with the bills itself, or when talking to senators, if you have an idea, is make it simple, make it meaningful, and make it doable. And just kind of those three things, just keep it as simple as possible, because I know once we start to overcomplicate things, that's when the committees could start poking holes in it and so forth. So those are kind of my three things that I think about to kind of like not overcomplicate things too much.
I would say, kind of echoing what Robert said about fiscal notes, we just had lobby school this past week where we chatted with a bunch of private lobbyists. Rachel's nodding because she was also there. The biggest thing they said is if you've got a bill with a fiscal note, hold it. Like if you have a bill that's going to ask for money, do not bring it this year. I hate saying that. I really do. But as Rachel mentioned, this giant budget hole we have is only getting bigger. And if you bring a bill with any sort of fiscal note, unless you have a specific plan as to how you're going to get that money, and it's, special, it's not going to impact the current deficit, you're just going to look out of touch. And I think that sometimes what we, as a community of nonprofits, can struggle with in the legislature is the image of legitimacy. I think sometimes senators can get frustrated because we look like we're out of touch, because they think that we live in like this wonderful dreamland of, everybody gets every basic need met and all that crazy stuff. So that's kind of the biggest thing is like if you have a fiscal note, I would really recommend holding it. But also, I mean, Robert's making all the great points. If you can give them an easy win, or if you have a bill that's essentially ready-made, where you're like, I've got this bill, here's the first draft, here's my complete plan. Maybe I've been talking to other senators and like, here's the general vibe of the body. If you can kind of give them basically a gift-wrapped win, they're gonna love that and they're gonna eat that up. And again, Robert's just had all the good points. Get those bills in like now. If you wait genuinely much longer, I mean, I would really say probably first week of December is a firm deadline. Your senators are not going to have any space, or they're just not going to want to take it because they're already swamped. If you start asking for meetings now, you probably won't get to meet with them until January. Just because that's their calendars are full. They're being courted by many suitors. Their dance cards are full. So it is like kind of a bummer for me to be like, be realistic. Don't shoot for the stars, but like we also do want to maintain that community image of legitimacy. And if you bring something that has like, God forbid, like $1 million fiscal note, they're just gonna laugh you out of the room.
I think that uh, everything happens so fast. And I would echo everything that Corey and Robert have said. Um, I think another good tool outside of those, the legislature itself, is find a buddy, an advocacy buddy, or more than one, because you all have jobs all day and are doing things. And so having somebody who's kind of paying attention, because things do move so quick, that's helpful to have someone being like, hey, by the way, your bill got mentioned in XYZ, or so and so's eyeing that as a potential place to take money from, or contribute to, or interested in this area. So not only the staff and the legislators, but make sure you're letting other people know what your kind of primary focus is. And if you need someone to be paying attention and say, hey, let me know if something moves on this, like lean into the advocacy community. We all get a piece, and it works much better when we're all doing it together.
Yeah. The budget, obviously, and you've all mentioned, is a big issue and is going to get in the way of a lot of people's plans. But I know a lot of nonprofits don't really engage in discussion on the budget or advocacy. But what are your thoughts on advocacy with the budget? Because the budget is full of decisions. They're making policy decisions with what they set their priorities for their priorities, and for a lot of them, property taxes is the priority, and it's certainly the governor's. What do you think about advocates, nonprofit advocates, engaging on the budget, and how do you talk to senators about what their priorities are? And do you think it's worthwhile to try to impact what their priorities are?
When you're asking this question, I always think about how Open Sky says that the budget is a moral document. Like that phrase rolls around in my head like a bingo ball literally every day, because we don't really have the excuse as advocates to do the like, oh, I don't know how the budget works. Like, we don't really have that excuse anymore. We do not have the luxury to be ignorant in how the budget process works, because it touches every part of our life, whether or not we want it to. And I would bother to even say it is your responsibility to have at least a rudimentary understanding of how the budget works. I remember Rachel talking about trying to understand the budget last year, and I know you spent like hours and hours and hours doing it. Like we met for a meeting and she like had all the documents out, and I was like, wow, she's incredible. But like you need to be Rachel. We all need to be Rachel and like learn how the budget works. Open Sky is a fantastic resource. They have so many wonderfully educated individuals who will break it down for you like you're five due to personal experience. They will break it down for you in the most basic ways. And once you understand, you get enough information to be dangerous, and showing the legislators that you know ball, and sometimes even more than they do, about the budget, not only looks impressive, it allows you to make more convincing arguments about why they should care about the things that you care about, especially when a lot of the issues we work on are proactive, where they might cost more money up front, but end up saving the state, but like the state money in the long run. If you can say, oh, it's maybe the beginning of your term here, and, after you win re-election, you'll get to brag when you finish out your second term that, like, oh, I saved the state, $50 million in childcare expenses because I signed on with this bill with Kids Can and it did a great job. We kind of just don't get to pretend we don't know how the budget works anymore, because it's not kind of the like cutesy little excuse it used to be, because we just have to know.
Corey just did like the most beautiful, like little minute of how you tie in all these factors to get a senator to vote for a bill. That was lovely. And I will say, you don't need to be me. I do it so that I can make it into a handout that you can look at. So just use what I've already found. And Open Sky is a fantastic, fantastic resource. So I would agree. The league is kind of interesting because we are so focused on obviously democracy issues, but also some social issues. And so we've been trepidatious to get involved with appropriations or revenue, but we're more and more realizing that's where we have to be. So a good place to start if that feels overwhelming, because I get it, is to just pay attention to the appropriations or revenue committees, watch some of those hearings. If you're not sure what those bills mean, because a lot of them, they don't look like they're touching on your issue, and then you find out they are, ask a senator, ask a friendly senator, ask an advocate, and watch the hearing for that, just to see what's being said, because I think that helps frame the conversation in a way that's useful. So I would say put your toe out there first if you haven't yet. The other thing I would say on the budget piece is, and especially it's so important that advocacy groups do this, tie that to real things, real money, give examples, show what that means. And if you can make that specific to their district, even better. But we got to help them. It's a faceless person that they're making policy about. Make that a real person. Better yet, connect them to that person. But that's something we can do that oftentimes paid lobbyists can't. Even the senators, they don't have the time and effort. Let's make it easy for them to see what that impact actually means.
And I was going to pull the quote, there's always money in the banana stand, for the Arrested Development fans. But because part of it is we talk about this huge shortfall, but it's also a huge budget. They're deciding where to invest, and so it's not just a shortfall. They're already deciding where to invest. So our hopes is that our elected officials invest in what is meaningful and what is impactful. For that. Exactly. How much could a banana cost? Most senators do not know. No, but when you're talking about the budget, I remember when I was in lobby school, most senators don't know the ins and outs of all the budget, and especially fresh, so the more knowledge that we have kind of going forward, the better. But I still look at it as like there is money there, it's just they have the ability to choose where to invest that. So we have as advocates the ability to kind of continue to educate them on what these kind of investments mean. And like I said before, that sometimes we need to spend money to make money here in Nebraska. If we talk about property taxes, but if people are fleeing Nebraska, we're not going to have more taxes to pull on. So my goal is like, how do we keep more people in Nebraska or moving to Nebraska with kind of different things in order to be able to kind of make money and hopefully get our head above water.
It's also useful to point, if you're able to pull things that have happened, because also a lot of times we get accused of arguing the sky is falling. Unfortunately, in this case, it is because the sky is actually falling. But oftentimes that's what gets lobbed of like, oh, that's not going to happen. Pull something from another state, pull something from our history, give them something, not just the concrete person in front of them, but also the like, historically, this is this is a thing that has happened, and here's how we can potentially fix it or mitigate it in the future.
I think some of the advice that you've given on that question would also flow into the next question. Everybody knows very well that the legislature in debate and decorum has been contentious and a lot more partisan than it used to be, unfortunately. And topics that we talk about, democracy, poverty, childcare, have been made political. How do you handle that? You still need to talk about your topics. Democracy is good. How do you talk to senators about those things that are important to people in a way that doesn't set them off politically?
Well, I think about sometimes the words get spoken back to us as entitlements. Those are kind of also when I hear senators start to say that, I'm like, oh, I already kind of know where they're coming from. And there's been some, I'm saying messaging shifts, but kind of clarity for, I've always said, consistent childcare equals consistent workforce. This is a workforce issue for Nebraska, not just about, getting kids in care and educated in a safe place. So part of it is just kind of shifting the message a little bit to kind of what we're really talking about, or kind of what appeals to them. So that was kind of my first thing that I thought of when you asked that, Lori.
Yeah, I always try to start from a foundational place of something we can all agree on, particularly with democracy issues. It's like, yeah, man, I want your vote to count. I want everybody's vote to count. So, how do we make that work for everybody? And even if they disagree with that, you're putting them in a place where they have to say that they don't want everyone's vote to count. So even if that's the case, make them say that hard thing, but start from that foundational place of something you all might hopefully agree on. The other thing is, it's not worth it to get in a fight about things. I feel like being the reasonable person in the room has just always served me very well, even when others are not, and you want to not be the reasonable person, but I just, keep that even keel as much as you are able. It may not pay off in the exact moment, but it will in the long run. And then finally, even with being reasonable, like, it's okay to correct the record. It's okay to call things out. Sometimes the league gets accused of leaning left, and it's very easy for me to say that, our stances have been the same for 100 years. We haven't really moved. The country or parties might have, but our stances are the same. So it's okay to correct the record, but do it in a way that makes sense and kind of tries to rise above that.
I definitely echo those points. I always open with like, we're a nonpartisan 501c3 and like that is our priority. I also kind of usually will let senators give me their impression of what we do first, to be like, oh, like we haven't had a huge presence in the lobby before. Is there anything you know about us? Sometimes they're right. Sometimes we're Civic Nebraska. Sometimes they're wrong. So I kind of just take some time to either set the record straight, like Rachel said, or just be like, our goal is to make sure that everyone can engage in the political process, often just like you have. I definitely, yeah, everyone's actually Civic Nebraska, believe it or not. We always talk about like, here are the things that matter to us. Like, it's important that, people can run like if you are insert retired businessman, insert retired blue collar worker, insert other retired person. Or like we want people who look like us to be in the legislature. We want people to be able to vote. It's kind of like Rachel said, when you present these kind of universally good things, it's up to them to be like, I think it's bad. And then it looks bad. Like I always think about Senator Holdcroft just straight up denied a meeting with me and then the next day dropped that bill that just gutted vote by mail. And I was like, "Oh, so you actually don't care if you like look like a bad person when it comes to voting." So, and it's also when it comes to a lot of the hyper-partisan stuff, you do need to know where your energy is worth it and where your energy is not. Like once that happened, I was like, I don't think Rick and I are really going to jive on election issues. And that's kind of my whole job. So like maybe I will expend my energy somewhere where even if it's not met 50-50, like maybe they'll meet me 30%. Maybe they'll meet me 25%. And just like getting them to know who we are. And I always also just try to present myself as a resource, even if they're not going to particularly listen to me on something, to be like, if you need numbers on like a voter breakdown in your district, or you're curious about some statistic that I can give you, like, please just let me do that and try and make inroads through being like a useful tool. Because even if they maybe don't care about what I have to say this year, maybe next year they do.
I was gonna say it's don't burn any bridges, even though you're tempted to light that match sometime. But you also got me thinking of some, I don't know if you call it geographical bias, because like a lot of us are Omahans or Linguist, and they're like, oh, here comes the Omaha people for their. So for any of our bills, we really have to also kind of like, what does this actually mean for rural Nebraska? Obviously, that makes up the majority of our state, and really making sure we have the messagings so we can speak to that, because obviously once it gets to the floor of the legislature, but even before that, our Health and Human Services Committee, their only diversity is geography. Obviously, it's 100% white males at this point. But I was like, but we also have to think, how does this affect, their communities, and then we kind of bring that into play as well, because I feel like sometimes that's also the case that that we're kind of they feel like they're kind of Eastern Nebraska biased as well, or they kind of have some of that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true and something that needs to be looked out for. Something else that made what you discussed made me think of is when things are rough and there are contentious matters in front of the legislature, there are certain advocates or certain groups that think we march, we burn it down, we yell. And I know that's important. And it's important for some people to be able to take that stand. How do you balance that with the need to still to be a person who senators will still meet with and not burn it down? It seems like it's important enough that those people need to be able to do that, but I think you have to maintain a certain level of temperament to be able to work with senators. How do you deal with that within your organization?
This is something that we have worked a lot on because we as Nebraskans have a lot of access to our legislature. And we want to keep it that way because it's good. So one thing I'll just say on the side is, we knew there was a contentious issue coming up for a group of advocates. And so we reached out and met with State Patrol and just said, hey, we want you to know we're here. This is what we're telling our folks. We know there are others that we have no control over. Like, how can we be helpful? Here's my number. They gave me theirs. Like, that was a really great place to start. And that also was helpful because some of our troopers gave me some, like, these are very specific things that we're concerned about. So we actually did a series of like, here's how the legislature works. Also, here's how the building works. And here's a couple things you might think about that's able to be shared. So I think that we try to do as much as we can on the front end with that. I think it sounds silly, but setting the example of what it looks like when you're actually in the space. And then finally, I would say that doing the work and being on the ground earns you the respect of both the legislators and the protesters, the advocates, the people who are raising and using their First Amendment rights. We had one issue in particular that we'd worked on for a really long time, and we got some insight from a senator that they said, don't make it a thing. It will draw attention in a way that some senators may feel like they need to change their votes. And so because, they respect that we've been doing the work, when that comes from someone in the area, people are more likely to be like, okay, this is not the right day. Let's give them another place to go. Let's do a rally on this day in this place. That is an important voice. Let's find the space for it, but let's be strategic about where. So I think that relationship with both the senators and the advocacy community to be a respected person that organization, I shouldn't say person, it's really the organization that they're willing to kind of listen to.
I think one thing that there's kind of some friction between like lobbyists and other policy folk is that like if you're in the legislature every day, you just don't have the luxury to be the person who burns it down. Like you need to defer that to someone else in your organization where you can be like, oh, they did that crazy thing. But you need to have kind of a degree of separation. If you want to be the person who like burns it down and is at the front line of every protest, telling every senator to go F themselves, working in the rotunda every day is just not going to be for you. It's just not. Like whenever there's protests, I always joke with people at the table. I'm like, you can put my number on your arm and I'll be the one to go bail you out of jail. Like, and sometimes that's just who you have to be. Is just the person who kind of does a lot of like backdoor work. And it's not always as sexy and glamorous as being the person who like wants to go throw the Molotov cocktail, but it's still really important. And a lot of this work, we have to remember to not let good be the enemy of, or great let be the enemy of good. Where it's like, oh yeah, I might love to just like, get rid of every anti-trans bill that's on the books and just like burn it all down. But maybe the win is like, getting rid of some extra bad amendments that were put on, Senator Cowl's anti-trans bill. The wins inside the legislature, at least right now, with the current makeup of who is there, are done in inches, not miles. And I hate that it's that way. I think we all hate that it's that way. But if you're kind of the impatient type who is ready to see big leaps and bounds, you might need to become a different political affiliation because we're just not in that environment right now. But what can, I don't know. I think like everyone who's in the rotunda all the time works really hard and you don't see it. You just don't see it because sometimes that work is like one really meaningful conversation over lunch or like one good set of emails back and forth during a hearing. It's a lot of stuff you just don't see. Um, so although we too all want to burn it down, we just can't. It's not an option because you're working with very temperamental individuals who will remember if you make a negative comment about their shirt, but not all the incredible things your organization has done for their community. That's just how it is.
I'm reminded because this is also for the nonprofit world. Like I've said, you only have to lose your credibility once, and that's the same thing kind of with our, the legislators as well. But I also agree, Corey. For some reason, bad bills seem to move at the speed of lightning, and good bills are just trying to turn the Titanic. I don't know why it's so slow, but
I'm just going to re-highlight one thing that I said because I think, especially in the work we do, it's really important. Give people who want to take us, we don't want to lose people having a voice and community advocating and having a passion for something. Let's give them a different place to go to put that's more meaningful, that's going to have more of an impact. So that's also a strategy, is to think, can we have a rally in a different place? Can we have a rally in a certain district that we need? Give the people who have that energy somewhere to use it because it is useful. We as being around the legislature know that might not be the place, but use it. Find a place for them, to give them a place for that to go.
I really like this format of Advocacy 101, and I realize maybe it doesn't give the basic 101 of advocacy, but this is so helpful because you all are newer advocates. You haven't been around for 20 years doing lobbying, and I think you bring a really great, fresh, and a perspective that newer advocates, it's useful for them to hear. And I've always been a believer that together, nonprofits working together are stronger and more impactful as a whole, because there are so many of us. They're statewide. What do you do to be a good partner or to work with other nonprofits? And what can people who are newer or on this call wanting to just start getting into advocacy, what can they do to enter that space as well?
and I'm hoping. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Robert. No,
Well, I was
I
gonna
went.
say, I was hoping Hannah would put in, she might have put in for the group about, it'll end up being weekly legislative calls on Thursday. That has been super helpful for me to, one, kind of not just for my issues, but the bigger scope. And we start to identify who are my peers, where's the network that I'm building, because early on you just feel like you're on your own. Like, am I only the one that cares about this? Or and when we talk about advocacy, ends up turning into strategy, and that is kind of the key part of it if you really want to kind of get anything done. So that would become my first thing. I know we're all kind of newbies here, so we're just not completely jaded yet. But yeah, so I would say, find your tribe, because that makes a big difference. And even if it's your first time in the rotunda, it can be scary, like calling out, like Corey said, bring a buddy, and it just makes it easier. Let's call out, the senator, and I did that with one of our staff last year. I felt like I was a little hesitant, and I was like, no, they're mostly people, but just hey, and just call them out for a few minutes, saying, hey, here's one of my concerns, whatever. It's ends up kind of, it goes back to experience builds confidence.
Yeah, I can't echo that. Bring a friend enough. That is absolutely something I try to prioritize, is, who can join me on this so they can feel comfortable. My very first experience was a league member who just said, hey, come down and sit through a hearing with me. And I would not have felt comfortable in that room if she wasn't showing me kind of how to, it's not that hard. You sit in a room and you listen, but it feels super overwhelming the first time you do it. So, bring a friend. And in that particular instance, she at the end just said, hey, why don't you want to come meet this senator, and made that introduction. And it was like something snapped in me where I'm like, oh, I can do this. Like, I'm a human, they're a human. We're all just trying to make policy. So bring a friend anytime you can. If you see someone in the rotunda who looks sad and lonely, say hello to them. Corey is always one that I love because often I'm not down as much as she is, but it always makes me happy that I know I've got at least one person I can be like, I have a friend here. So I think that's a really important way to kind of start. And I think it's just remembering that, like, you're bringing a perspective they don't have. They are trying to look at 1,000 things, and they're not going to be able to see what you need them to see unless you're the one they're telling them. Every single bill, someone is going to be telling them how to think about it. Someone is going to tell them how they should vote. I would hope that it's the people who are living it on the ground that need to be there and giving them that perspective. So know that it's imperative that you are there. You need to be there. We need you.
Yeah, I definitely echo both of those points. Going to the rotunda by yourself, which I did a lot last year, for the first probably 5 to 10 times you go, feels like you're at your first boy girl party and you don't know anyone and everyone's already friends and you like I literally was like I feel like a 13-year-old. Like, I went to private school, I went to Catholic school. It's like I feel like I'm at my first like public school party. I was like everybody knows each other. It's weird. And a lot, like, frankly, a lot of the private lobbyists, like, will not go out of their way to say hi to you, and it feels intentional. They just don't care. It's not intentional. They're all pretty nice. So you do have to, like, really be okay with, like, putting yourself out there, and, like, to be cringe is to be free. Go compliment somebody on their shoes or their suit or whatever. Like, it like can feel kind of agonizing to go by yourself, but it is really good. It's really good. It's genuinely like exposure therapy. I can talk to anyone about anything forever now. And it is, I think it's genuinely way more efficient to go with another person because you can pull twice as many people. And that way, if you have an instance where two senators come out at once, you just split up. I think it's a far better use of your time. But in terms of just like getting into advocacy, I always try and get coffee with people. Like, I've made Rachel get coffee with me. I got to see Robert during lobby school last year. So, but like those people where you're like, wow, they're doing really cool work, they're doing really good work. Like, go take them to coffee, go take them to lunch, like get their perspective on things, you know? We just started 2 work groups for lobbying and policy because I talked to a bunch of people and I was like, what's a need that you keep seeing? And they were like, we just need work groups on these things where we can do strategy and align on these things. And that's literally how they were born. And it's sometimes you just have to be the person that's like, maybe this is a dumb idea, but we can try it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So it really is unfortunately me being like, go be an extrovert. But like, unfortunately, I keep saying unfortunately, like, that's just what you have to do is like go talk to senators and put yourself out there, talk to staff, put yourself out there. Also, if there's any personal connection you can leverage in the legislature, use it. Like, I came here from out of state. There's one guy who's somebody's LA that I worked with as a campus host, genuinely probably 8 years ago now. And I was like, oh my God, Michael, do you remember when we worked together? And he was like, yeah. And it was almost better he didn't remember me because then he felt bad. So like literally any leverage you have of any degree of connection, use it. It will be helpful.
Senator Duncan and I are now friends because KU basketball. Like, that's where it started. We both realized we went to KU, and now that's someone that I can say, hey, what is this bill doing? So yeah, anything you can leverage.
We are getting up against time. Sorry we didn't leave much room for questions, but I want to thank you, Bree. I think you brought up so many great points, and we've recorded this webinar, and I think we definitely need to publish it because you brought up a lot of things that I think people who have been lobbying for a long time forget about. and it's important for newer advocates to feel connected. And you brought up a lot of those points and how they can start and what they should do to feel comfortable in that space. So I want to thank you. You guys gave incredible advice. That was really a pleasure to listen to you. And I guess we'll just see if there are any questions.
We do not have any right now. Well, we've already answered all the ones that we had, so I think we're good.
Okay. Well, we are all a resource for anyone who needs one. If you see Robert, if you see Corey, if you see Rachel, if you email them,
you just have to bring me Diet Coke.
Okay, that's one. You have to bring a Diet Coke for Robert, but it will buy you a lot, I think, with him. And whenever you have any questions or just want to discuss a topic or something that you're working on, feel free to reach out to any of us. And thank you for attending today, and thank you guys. You were a great panel. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It was so fun.
Awesome. Thank you, Lori, and thanks everyone. I put the link for our Thursday policy calls. If you want more of this kind of what we're talking about now, please join us. The next one will start weekly in December. So Thursdays at noon through the legislative session. So at least through April. Thanks, everyone.